This is John Upchurch with the Proficient team. I'm putting together a video here about getting started with the Ignition framework. Now this is in reference to the 2.0 initial launch of Ignition. Just a few quick points about this. We've gone through pretty hefty rework of a lot of our infrastructure and our framework. We have really made things a lot more modular and a lot more flexible. I mean, they were before, but we've gone out of our way and we think kind of outdone ourselves with this. So we're really happy with it, really proud of it, and we're hoping that you like it as well. So this video should help you get started. So I'm going to start just by going ahead and launching the Sitecore installer. We'll go through this, and since I have to put together a website demo or a local website anyways, we're going to go ahead and just set that up. So this is actually, we're going to be putting together a website for our Proficient digital brand, so I will be doing that right now. Alright. I will install my license file momentarily. I'm going to pause while I get all this wired up here. Okay, so since that is now finished, nobody needed to watch all that. I am going to edit my host file, and we're going to add in, we're going to actually just update this one to be pd.local. It's nice and easy to type, and it is best to use a .local address or some sort of top-level domain with this stuff. And then we will go to IIS, go to this Proficient Digital site in here, and we're going to just edit the bindings to be pd.local. So now, if I could type everything correctly. This should come up momentarily. And the old admin B. So before I go and edit any of the config files or anything like that, once we have this site set up, basically the point is that we are going to configure everything as it would need to be for a starting site here. And that will include installing Sitecore PowerShell extensions. If we were using other tools like Web Forms for Marketers or Coveo or any of those other things, then we would be including that in this install as well. Effectively, as the architect of the solution, we will set everything up in Sitecore, and then we will copy all of this, all of the original source files, and we're going to put those in source control to make it easy to have a rollback point for our developers and to allow them to kind of get things all set up and configured. So, but either way, we're going to need to be doing this right now. So we're going to go ahead and go into the desktop, and we are going to start by installing the Sitecore PowerShell, because the Ignition team very much supports Sitecore PowerShell because it is awesome. If you haven't messed with it, you absolutely should. So let me browse to where I have those files, and I am installing currently Sitecore PowerShell extensions 4.3. You can get this from the Sitecore Marketplace, and I highly recommend doing so. Matter of fact, you really need it for the Ignition framework because we make use of it as part of the framework as well. So I'm going to go ahead and install this and then pause this while this runs because this can take a couple of minutes and nobody wants to sit through that. Be right back. And now that this is complete, we are going to restart the client, which it has just done. And then now we're going to install the Ignition packages. So we're going to upload that. Choose a file, ignition starter items. You can find those items. Well, let's finish this. You can find those items. This is on GitHub, the Sitecore Ignition, ignition.foundation. They're actually in the code base, but the wiki has a link to the Visual Studio template project, which you can put in your templates folder. And for Visual Studio, this is in the My Documents Visual Studio templates project slash, yeah, let me open a window up. One moment. Okay, so it will be in your users, your user, documents, Visual Studio 2015, templates, project templates. You can drop that installer file or that template project right in here, and that will give you the templates that include all the configuration for Ignition. So once again, you can get that from the Sitecore Ignition Foundation wiki. You can also get the starter package or the starter items from here as well. So we've selected these. We're going to go ahead and install this, upload it. Should install pretty quickly. There's not too many items. We're just going to do a merge. And then we're good to go. So a quick tour here. We'll kind of go over what gets provided by everything. So you can see this Ignition folder here. The Ignition folder, if you've used or looked at Ignition 1.0, you'll recognize some of these things, although we have simplified this quite a bit. So your item base and workflow base and rendering parameters base, these are all here. You still got some base classes. This is basically for your page and your site. Our page will inherit from the SEO template, which will kind of give you some social media stuff, some SEO stuff. You can use this if you choose to. It is not required. Same with metadata. You can expand on these things as you need to. Navigation, the title for the navigation, hide from navigation or hide the children from navigation, and you can expand on your own taxonomy here. Containers. These are basically for settings folders types. So we've got a content folder, an options folder, and a settings folder. We've got our page. You should always, for every website you make, every website project you put in here, you should make your own inherited version of this page, because then you'll apply all your presentation details to that. And then we've got some settings items. So there's a lot less here. We're not using the inherited field templates anymore that you might have seen from version 1. We just decided that that approach, we're working to simplify everything quite a bit to reduce the learning curve and to make everything as efficient and flexible as possible. So you do not need to worry about inheriting from any of that stuff to have any of the framework work anymore. We've also included a sites folder here. This would be where you would create your sites. So for this example, I'm going to create a template folder, and we're going to call it proficient digital project.sc. Actually, we can't call it that, but we can rename it that in a moment. Or we'll display name it that in a moment. Proficient digital project.sc. And I do this because this will match the project names in Visual Studio later on. Often I'll go ahead and change this icon, but I'm not going to do that right now. And that's it for the templates. The branch templates, in a later video I'll go over how we're using the branch templates. It's pretty much how we used them in Ignition 1.0. So you can always refer back to that other video if you need to until this new one comes out, which may even be today. So that's our templates. There is a little bit within system. You'll see there's the PowerShell stuff that we just installed. There is not a lot that's actually being used in here right now, but this is for future proofing. This will be where any of our Ignition settings will go. And then delete this item. Just going to leave the links for now. We create a site node, and then you will create a site item once you've created your base page type for your site. you'll create a home item and the rest of your tree from there. So the sites will go under here. And yeah, so you've got a localization file. This is basically just a dictionary. We'll go ahead and turn on standard fields. So yeah, this is basically just a localization dictionary. Every site can then have its own localization dictionary that will be configured in the site definition.config. And we've got a place for global settings that would go, that would apply if you were multi-site or multi-tenant. It would apply to all sites here. So that's the Sitecore stuff. Oh, that you also get you get our ignition layout, which this will actually be updated, so that path will no longer be correct. You're going to get some placeholders. So these are things that we recommend. You can kind of get started with this. I use, per a suggestion from Chris Castle of Sitecore, I actually started using cloning. So I make one shared template or shared placeholder and then clone it, so then I can just edit the allowed controls in one place and they apply to all of these. And this is basically for our frames, which we use to position content on the page, etc. And then placeholders for your header, footer, and all that. And then there is in here you would just do your own renderings. We do break the renderings up, and I'll go over this in another video, according to a folder just for the site or for the project, and then a folder for every feature project, because your renderings should all be tied to features according to the Helix manifesto, which we have adhered to quite vigorously with this, but pragmatically as well. And that's it for the Sitecore side of things. So if I had anything else that I would be installing, I would install that right now, but currently I do not. So the next step is we are going to prepare our Sitecore solution. So I'm going to open Visual Studio, and I am going to create a new project. And I have this Ignition template project. It should be under just Visual C#. Technically, it depends wherever you decide to put it in your folders. In your template folder is where it's going to show up, so you could create a folder for Ignition if you choose to, or anything like that. But effectively, we're going to call this proficient.project. Actually, we'll call it proficient digital.project.sc. This will be our website project in the project section, or the project segment of the site. Once again, the Helix segments being foundation, feature, and project. So we will create this here. We are going to create a directory for the solution, and we have that. So that should be creating right now. And you have it. So this is the core of the project. I will go over this really quick. This applies, you can use the same project template for projects or features. Some of the things that it includes is every project includes config file for this particular config. So we believe that because we're segmenting things out into multiple projects anyways, that every project should be completely self-contained. That includes the project levels or the features. So the config, every single Visual Studio project has a project config. It will also have its own serialization. We use Unicorn, but you are obviously able to use TDS or anything else that you choose. And then we just make sure that those things get serialized into these particular projects. If you're using TDS, obviously you're going to have your own TDS project for it. But yeah, I mean, it's still pretty straightforward. You're going to keep everything within one or two projects if you're using the Visual Studio, and then obviously test projects or things like that as well. So, but each project or each feature and project in terms of Helix is discrete to itself. Then basically, you'll have a controller, you'll have view models, and you'll have your views. We include a basic web config in here, and the web config here, neither of these get deployed, at least not if you were using publish for this. So these are both set to build action none, do not copy, so they do not, oh, this one actually will get copied over, but that won't matter. This needs to get copied over anyways because it's just for the views, and this is the same for everything. So this will not overwrite your global web config. It will publish out of views. So from there, I just want to verify how the files have been deployed. So I'm going to go here and refresh this. There should be, oh, did I create this in a bad spot? I think I created this in a bad spot. Visual Studio, one moment. Nope, I did not create this in a bad spot. So this is in ignition.demo, and that is not correct. One moment again. Okay, that is sorted out. So I have moved the project back to where it should be, and this is what we're looking at. We've got our solution file and our project folder here. So anyhow, the controllers, we will have one controller. Generally it will be, the reason we only do one controller generally is because if you're using more than one controller, you should probably be putting it into another project. So based on the Helix principles, you're going to group functionality together into features. The website project itself is really only needed to provide some basic site wire up. We will include like a site definition.config and such in here. All of those kind of things that you would need to wire up. We'll set up our unicorn and everything in here as well. So yeah, effectively you'll have just a site controller. So we'll just call this, we'll do we'll just call it site controller. For now, this we'll need, why are we having a problem with system.web? The next thing, I almost forgot, the next thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to manage NuGet solution or packages. So we should go over here and update everything. We'll update these. Okay, so that's finished. So now we're actually going to browse and we're going to search for Ignition, or you can use the console. And because this is our primary project file, we're going to install composition root here and add that as a NuGet package to this project. So that will just take a couple of moments, and this is going to give you Simple Injector, it's going to give you the glass mapper, it's going to give you the updated ASP.NET, bunch of things here. So then you're going to want to go over here, clear out Ignition, and just select all and update. So that's going to update your Simple Injector, your .NET MVC, the glass mapper, Castle Core, etc. So that will just take a moment. Alright, so now that everything is updated, I don't need to worry about this right now, so I'm not going to do this restart at the moment. And now I should be able to do Ignition Controller. So it will inherit from Ignition Controller, and it's telling me that I need to add the reference. Ah, darn it. See, okay, so here's a prime example of what you would not want to do. I have gone and installed the Ignition framework before copying my Sitecore stuff. So let's do that now. So we have here is the project folder. the solution folder. So it's right here. I'm going to create a folder here called _publish. And the reason we're doing this will become apparent later. So I'm going to add a new folder here called _source. And inside of this source file, I am going to go to my website folder. I'm going to select all. And actually, this is probably going to be quicker with PowerShell. So okay. Oops. And we will copy star -r for recursive -force, and we're copying this to my code drive. I set up a number of drives and shortcuts and everything like that in PowerShell to make things easier. This should be considerably faster than copying it with Windows. It should only take just a moment, and it is done. So now, if we come back to our source, we have our source file here. So the reason that I do this is there's actually several reasons. One of which is when we have developers doing things, sometimes you can, especially if you're jumping feature to feature, etc., you might generate artifacts in your source file or your actual website that you don't want. This gives you a clean copy, so you could actually just delete your entire website here, copy this fully configured starting point. That's why we went through and configured everything in Sitecore first, and then just copy this back over top of this now empty, and then publish, and all of your code will go out there, and you have a nice, pristine, clean install without artifacts. So we've done that. So now what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to add references, and I'm going to just browse. I'm going to go to Proficient Digital Project SC. We're going to go into the source file, the bin folder, and from here, I know there's a number of Sitecore DLLs that we're going to need. I'm going to grab a few of the extra ones that we may not need right away, but that eventually we probably will. So I'm going to get Sitecore Analytics and Analytics Model. I am going to get Sitecore.client. The important ones are going to be, however, Sitecore.kernel and Sitecore.mvc. Oh, and Sitecore.contentSearch and ContentSearch.link. Those four are the important ones. The other ones are useful as well, but not required. So now we have all of these things in here, and I am going to quickly uninstall and reinstall Glass so that we get those files. So oops. All right, I had to restart Visual Studio. So we'll restart this in just a moment. Fortunately, I have a fast computer. We'll open up our project again. And actually, we'll probably just do this from the NuGet package manager because it's probably easier. So we'll go to the installed tab here, Glassmapper SC Core. You can try updating and just see if it'll install the files. The reason that this is happening is because Glass uses a PowerShell script to see if you've got a reference to Sitecore, and if it does, it will install the site or glass mapper.mvc, etc. So don't do what I did. Reference your glass stuff first, and then add the ignition packages. We are probably going to be going over to making the glass items or the Sitecore items referenced from the Sitecore NuGet. The only issue that we have with that is because it's on a separate NuGet server, we cannot guarantee that everyone is going to have that set up. So that poses a little bit of a problem, but we will work around it. So either way, you now have those references, and you can actually reference the ignition controller. Everything is good here. So yeah, this is going to give you some of our view overloads and some of our other utilities that I will show you here. First, we're going to go ahead and create a view model though, and we'll just do this. So we'll just assume this is going to be a metadata, so we'll call this metadata view model with an L. And we're going to make this implement ignition view model, or extend ignition view model. And that's going to give us some basic properties. And well, let's just say that, excuse me, that we're going to just do this for the metadata component. So we will give this a page title and a page description. So we'll go public virtual string page title, and we'll do public virtual, if I could type, page description. And now the only other thing that we want to do is we want to come to our metadata template, and assuming that we're just going to use this one straight up as it is, you could obviously create your own. We would grab this ID, and I'm going to confirm the names. So this is page title and page description, so that matches what I've put in here. We also tend to use attribute configuration. We've tried both and just had more luck with attribute than Fluent, but you are more than able to use Fluent configuration as well. And I'll kind of go into that a little more, but both of those are fully supported without any sort of additional configuration, as long as you're using our project templates or you use our attribute. So I'm going to declare this a Sitecore type, give it a template ID, and I always misspell or mistype template, so we will fix that. And template ID equals. So we've given this a template ID, and we're also going to say automap equals true. So that's our view model. We have the two fields. We're going to have also access to the context page and a few other things from within the view model itself. But essentially, this is our view model. So we've got our controller, our view model. We'll create one view very quickly. We need to add a folder for this to go in, and it should always match the controller name. So we have site controller. We're going to call this site. And we're going to add a view. And a generic web. We'll just call this metadata.cshtml. Blow this out. Metadata view model. Get a little sharper. Save that. And yeah, so here we're just going to add, since this is not going to be editable or anything like that in the page editor directly, we are going to say at model dot page title, and I'm gonna skip over the extra stuff here. I know you would be putting this into a meta tag. Model dot page description. Let's just assume that we've got a front end UI developer that's going to come in and wrap all this stuff as needed. So effectively, any of your markup or anything would work just like that for something like this. So now we've got our view model, which is very simple. We've got a view, which is also very simple. So we come back to our controller. So what we've added is a facility to do two different things. One is we can just do public action result or view result or whatever you prefer here. And we're going to call this action the same thing as our view name. And from here, we are nice and simple. We're just going to return view of type metadata view model. Sort this out, and figured it out. So we need to publish a new version of the NuGet package is all. So this was a feature that was added later. We will do that today. I will purvey on the skills of Mr. George Chang to do that. But in this particular case, normally you would be able to just return view. If you're not doing any additional markup, then this syntax would work just fine. There is also then the facility to pass in a lambda in which you could do additional wire up. This being a lambda or just an action of type T, where T inherits the ignition view model. You can pass in an action, be it an anonymous method, a lambda, anything along these lines. I mean, effectively, this is an anonymous method. You could pass in a delegate, you could pass in a method name, any such thing, and say I wanted to override the value of the page title and append a project. So, a dot page title is equal to, and we'll just do a little bit of string interpolation here. We'll just say and end that statement. So effectively this allowed us to configure something in the view model without having to actually write a method or lengthy anything else. This can be abstracted out into a method that you could call later. Matter of fact, for larger sets of changes here, we definitely recommend that. So you can then also, if you're going to be reusing some set of functionality, we recommend abstracting it off into a method. And we plan on making use of this in the future for some common components to automatically wire things up as well. We can release NuGet packages, or you can create your own that will support this kind of method-based or lambda-based wire up of your view models. So this is it. So automatically now this metadata will come through, and it will give you this as your allow you to wire this stuff up. Once again, a little bit later today, you won't even need to pass this in if you're not going to be wiring anything up. You can just pass it in empty, and there's an overload for this that just basically returns the base wired up view model. And this is stuff that's all wired up by the framework. So that's basically creating a component. Now this is creating your main project, so you would have anything related to your website in here, which would include like metadata or your like layout and things like that. And you can use pretty much whatever you want for any of those things. I mean, we use something fairly simple. We do very modular layouts and such, and I will show some of that at another time in a subsequent video. But effectively this is the framework. So now a couple of points, or this is the project. A couple of points, just so you know, we also include a set of published profiles, which I will get to shortly, but these are the same for every single project, and there is a reason for that. And they use some magic that I'm about to show you in just a moment. And you just need to make sure that any assembly that you're using that is going to be involved with glass, or that's going to be involved in our IOC container, which is Simple Injector, if you add this assembly, or this attribute to your assembly, it will automatically get scanned and included in your solution when you deploy your code. So we iterate across all the binaries in your website that have that attribute, and they run in the installer if there's a package, an I package, which is one of the facilities of Simple Injector, that will automatically find those packages and run those, so they will get automatically, without any additional effort, get wired up into the IOC container. And as well, it will also look through and find any attributes, like I went through here with your view model. It'll find any of these types and automatically register these with glass. Also, it will automatically register any map files. So if you're using the Fluent mapping and the glass maps, it will automatically find and execute all of those. So all you have to do is create the files. You don't have to create anything that causes them to be registered or anything else. They automatically get run as part of the framework. That's just more of the magic under the hood. We're trying to make your lives easier. One more thing of note here, and this is also a facility that we've built into Ignition, and this was here before, but if you're new to the framework, you'll know this, or you'll need to know this. So if you add a copy of a view and add the _EE to the name, you can then go in here and modify this view or completely change the view, or however you want to do, so that it supports the experience editor. And the framework will automatically detect if we are in experience mode or in the experience editor editing, and if it does, it will serve this view, and if it isn't, then you will get this one. Once again, you don't have to do anything other than create this file in order for it to work. This file is not required, so if you don't need to use it, you don't have to, but the option's there. And that right there is kind of our philosophy with all of this. We provide all this stuff for you. You can use any of it in any way that you choose. We try to just be as flexible and everything as we possibly can for you. So one more step, I'm just going to, just for kind of perspective here, I'm going to go ahead and create another project, and we'll say that I'm going to create one for all of my heroes. So we're going to call this and we're going to use the same kind of naming that we would use with Helix. So the project, feature, and hero, we're going to create that. Once again, then, it would have its own configuration. We would usually have like a unicorn configuration for here, or once again, if you're using TDS, you would just create a TDS project to go along with this, and that's that. And then everything else is created exactly the same way. You can create as many of these as you need. Technically, if you're creating multiple sites, you could create multiple project files. You can also create class libraries, which would most likely be foundation, but could also potentially be feature. All you need to do is just make sure that they have that attribute. I don't have a template for that right now, but I can put one together pretty quickly. That will have this Ignition Auto Map attribute on it. And then once again now, so we have this new project. We don't want to install composition root to this. So we're going to install ignition.foundation.core. and that'll get the core dependencies without any of the additional config files or anything like that. And finishes up and everything is good. So now you have the ignition.foundation.core stuff, and that's it. From here you can work just like you normally would. So as many of these feature projects as you like with test projects. I mean, there's not really a lot to test in some of this, so I mean, you can kind of use your discretion about that, because there's not really a lot of logic. Most of this is just Sitecore. So yeah, you can set that stuff up, integration tests, that kind of thing. I mean, obviously you don't want to neglect testing entirely, but yeah, just build this up however you like. None of these things need to reference each other. Matter of fact, we recommend that you do not have these reference each other. Everything, once again, should exist in isolation so that you can just you can build or publish any one of these projects independent of all the others. You could lift and shift these things into something else. I mean, not so much the project ones, because by their very nature, these are associated with the project, but you could reuse this hero project somewhere else. Potentially just change the views or something like that. But all of your features should definitely be able to lift and shift. They should not have references to anything else that is outside of the foundation layer. So if you create a foundation project like a class library, you can reference those kind of things, and we will very often do that for shared models, etc. But yeah, those would be the only kind of references you'd want to have. You never reference outward, at the very least, if you are going to have references between these, which once again we don't recommend. You only want to reference inward. You don't want to ever reference out, because you're going to create sloppy dependency chains, etc. So, but this is not an architecture video, so that's it. As far as that goes, that's what you need to do to set up your projects in terms of the code. Now, there's one more little bit of magic that we've started doing that has turned out pretty good in terms of making things really flexible for us. So what we're going to do here is I have installed a tool called Link Shell Extensions. What this does is this will allow you to easily create symbolic links. So I will just right click here, and I will choose Pick Link Source, and then I will right click here, and I will say Drop As Symbolic Link. It's going to make me give approval, and now this points to the website folder. So this symbolic link takes me into the website folder, exactly. So now, if you notice in the Publish profile, this goes through this specific path. So it goes up into the _publish folder and then out through the website when you're publishing. So you eliminate the need for a bunch of different config transforms and all of that. It doesn't matter where they have put their website. So you're assuming you're working with a team. It doesn't matter where that website was put, or where that website folder was put, what it's installed about. Everybody is using the exact same thing in terms of their config. And release mode is basically the same thing, except it goes into release. Obviously, for other deployments down the line, you'll have custom publish profiles. But for your development work, this is all you need to do. And then I actually have a script. So if we do... There is actually, it's not in this one, I need to include this. Maybe it gets put into this other folder. But either way, I'll put a link to some source code for an example script. You can get it off of the ignition.foundation project, I believe. But I'll put some code up on the wiki for it. But effectively, it will execute a publish using the command line, and it will then publish all projects using the debug profile. So whereas you'd need either to use gulp, you could set it up to use gulp or something like that as well to do publish all your projects. I know if you're using TDS, you can have project dependencies and such that will allow it to do the publish stuff. Even if you're using TDS, I still probably suggest that you publish this way, just because, at least for your local development, just because TDS has a habit of leaving files in those folders. So like where it aggregates everything, it doesn't do as good a job, or at least it didn't last time I used it. So caveat there, that may have changed. Where you may have some artifacts or some orphan files there that you don't want. So this is definitely a little bit cleaner, I think, personally. Once again, it's all completely up to you and what you want to do. And yeah, so the command line will publish this. And like I said, I will put the code for that up on the wiki as soon as I am done with this video. So then the other side of it, because we use Unicorn, and Unicorn would have you set up config that will, let me find that folder. Yeah. So Unicorn has config files that would normally require you to specify a source folder for you to put things in. So we have got this is my website. So we have got this site here, and inside of the project, the Unicorn configs would point to here, and the serialization for project.sc would end up in this project. The serialization for feature.hero would end up in this project, and so on. So all of your items get serialized. There's a separate Unicorn config file in every app config folder. And effectively, they will use a symbolic link that goes the other way. So we have here in my root project, so I'm going to copy or pick link source for this. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to drop this as a symbolic link. And I am going to rename this symbolic link solution. So now, if I use something, use a path starting from the tilde slash for the web root, I can specify Unicorn goes up into this level of the folder. So something along the lines of, just do this, tilde slash dot dot slash dot dot slash solution, and then slash project name or whatever, etc. And then this would, I'd have to double check if it's 2 or 1. It might just be 1, something like that. And then this will go up through this symbolic link here and directly to your source folder so that it can reference these directly. So once again, instead of having to configure everyone setting up like a folder.config variable or something like that, you can just put this symbolic link in here, and it will go through the symbolic link to serialize your items back into this project so that they're all bundled up nice and snug in your source control of choice, preferably Git, and yeah, you're all good to go. So that pretty much wraps up the Getting Started guide. This is all stuff that I've kind of talked about on the wiki on GitHub. These instructions exist there as well. But this is everything that you would need to do to get your site ready to go. So from here, you can develop however you choose. We'll be putting together more modules and such. Because this whole framework is so completely modular, it's really easy to extend this and to add functionality, and we definitely plan on doing that. We've got a number of interesting features that we're setting up for the near future, so look for those to come. We're also looking at even breaking out the support for GlassMapper into its own project so that we can have provider models for things like Fortis or other ORMs, other serialization stuff, where we're going to make it slightly more modular than it currently is, but there's only so much more we can do. So yeah, it's plug and play and go. So this will allow you then to use the principles of Helix to develop your solutions. In like I said, we don't prescribe anything. We suggest, but you are free to do as you want. This allows you to kind of architect your solution in such a way that you're setting yourself up for success. You're using best practices. You're making your code very modular, very easy to maintain, deploy, etc., and go from there. So thank you for watching. I appreciate you checking out the video. I appreciate you using Ignition, and we definitely look forward to hearing your feedback. If you've watched this far and made it all the way through, do us a favor and click like, so that we can continue to get put high in search results when people are looking for these things. And I bid you good day.